Howdy, y'all. This is Ghost of Tsushima, and we are finally following through on a request sent over 3 months ago now. I apologize for the long wait. I've been traveling abroad and have been quite busy over the past season, but just getting straight into it, the entirety of the footage you are about to see is us going through a camp with the specific limitation that we can only attack the enemies by unsheathing our katana. Any move of ours that starts with the sword in its sheath is the only one we can use. From standoffs to neutral attacks to sprinting strike to the Dance of Wrath. As it turns out, with these moves alone, a challenge like this is completely possible to do. I will be showing the charm setup that I went with in order to make this challenge as fun and as enjoyable as possible, so that maybe y'all might want to try this playstyle a bit yourself. We're also on Lethal Plus. That's the highest difficulty you can be on a new game plus run. But unfortunately for you, or rather, unfortunately for all of us, this video isn't going to be all fun and enjoyable. We have to talk about Sony's recent business decisions and how it is not only affecting Ghost of Tsushima, but could potentially stifle any excitement or hype surrounding this game being ported to PC. Because for numerous reasons, Sony sees fit to want to stub their toe repeatedly, and have been over the past week, and we'll be getting into why that might be the case shortly. But first, some context. Helldivers 2. For anyone who has had any ear to the ground when it comes to the hottest games of recent memory, Helldivers 2 is perhaps one of the few live service games that has gotten such a positive player response to it because of its gameplay and because of how responsive its developers have been. This is not to say that Helldivers 2 doesn't have technical issues every other patch and wildly fluctuating game balance that routinely gets complained about by the broader community online, but it has become abundantly clear that the developers behind Helldivers 2, Arrowhead, are some incredibly dedicated and passionate creators that want to put forward a game that is worthy of your money and time. I've put over 100 hours into that game myself, and I have a lot of hope for that game's future, with how immensely fun and solid its gameplay foundations already are, alongside the potential for new content coming on the horizon. The thing is, the real kicker, is that this game is one that is published by Sony. And Sony likes to make puzzling decisions, and have been for years, if not decades now. Maybe this might make complete sense to any business majors out there, but bear with us here. If you have put your ear to the ground at all the past half month or so, you ought to not only have heard about Helldivers 2's success and popularity, you've also heard about how Sony almost completely kneecapped any positivity surrounding Helldivers 2, and this was for two reasons. The first one, Sony wanted to go forward on a rule where all PC players had to create a PSN account, and then link said account to their PC version of Helldivers 2. This was going to become fully enforced in earlier June. Initially, though, this PSN linkage was already the case at the release of Helldivers 2. For the first couple of days of this game being out, Helldivers 2 did ask PC players for a PSN account to be linked. However, due to the overwhelming popularity of the game, the servers became so overloaded that linking a PSN account just wasn't possible. That service wasn't working at the time. PC players couldn't create and link a PSN even if they tried. So Arrowhead, presumably with Sony's blessing and permission, made the PSN linking a skippable choice. So for the past few months, if you were on PC, you could now play the video game without creating any account that Sony wanted you to. This, of course, has changed, where now Sony was looking to reinforce this rule, which means that even if a player had already put triple-digit hours into Helldivers 2, if a PC player didn't have a linked PSN, they would not be able to play the game that they paid for And perhaps from a certain point of view, one could make a convincing argument that this PSN linkage is not that big of an issue. Sure. However, this was not the only thing that Sony has done the past week or so. Number 2, Sony full-on restricted over 100 countries from being able to purchase Helldivers 2 on Steam. And as it turns out, this list of countries are also countries where PSN accounts cannot be made in the first place. So imagine being a PC player, now finding your country on this list, and it doesn't matter even if you were willing to make a PSN for Helldivers 2, you just lost all access you paid for and put so much time into. After that, the online community's response to Sony's actions was, for lack of a better word, quite explosive. You had folks asking Steam for refunds. You had a huge review bombing of the game on Steam itself. Over 200,000 negative reviews in about 72 hours for what once was already a highly enjoyed video game on Steam. And you had players filling up the ears of Arrowhead's developers and CEO. Not all of it particularly civil either. Regardless, long story short, not only did Sony see the overwhelming negative response, they publicly announced that they would not go forward on enforcing the PSN rule they had in store for Helldivers 2. On paper, this seemed like a victory for the player base in general. However, Sony has not let up on the second issue here. That being, half of the world still cannot purchase Helldivers 2, let alone even play it, let alone even link a PSN account. Sony has not walked back this restriction on their live service game as of May 13th. It ought to be early May 14th in Japan right now where they're headquartered. But here's one more kicker, and ultimately why we are here today. Because Ghost of Tsushima has the same restrictions as Helldivers 2. Right now on Steam, you can see a full list of countries that Ghost of Tsushima cannot be bought in. As I'm speaking to you right now, Ghost of Tsushima ought to be releasing for PC audiences in 2 days, and Sony still hasn't walked back these restrictions. Because Ghost of Tsushima does, in fact, have a multiplayer mode, an incredibly fun multiplayer mode that I might add, where the developers were promising full crossplay between PlayStation and PC. While the Helldivers 2 debacle was going on, Ghost of Tsushima on PC was on the path with asking its PC players for a PSN account to be made and linked in order to play its multiplayer. But it was not required for single player. Again, in a vacuum, maybe making a PSN isn't the biggest trouble that it ought to be. Sure, Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, Riot Games, Rockstar, Blizzard Activision, and so on have their players create separate accounts to enjoy their games online. It's honestly dizzying how many of these companies have similar practices here, because at the same time, players really ought to be careful with how many potential security breaches that they open themselves up to by having so many accounts active and by having so many passwords floating out in the ether. Not even Steam itself is safe from hackers taking its user base's passwords and personal information. I would highly encourage y'all to stay on top of what accounts you do and do not have, and what information, either real or otherwise, you have provided to these companies. Protect yourselves in the online jungle, because it's the fact that Sony is apparently so stubborn about pumping their PSN account numbers and generating as much subscription revenue as they can that they are more than willing to restrict purchases for over half the world for a game that is going to be, for the vast majority of its player base, a single-player focused video game. How do we make sense of this? How does Sony make sense of this? On second thought, don't answer that. The answer has always been, and perhaps will always be, they are looking to pump their profits. That's what their business is. That's the rot that's been clinging to the roots of the gaming industry for a long time now. And Helldivers 2, with, unfortunately, Ghost of Tsushima, are going to be Sony's little test runs. They're sacrificial lambs for what we can only assume to be Sony's genuine attempt to maximize revenue with their multiplayer games being ported to PC. If only this process could have been more seamless. Instead, it's like pulling teeth. Because now, seeing Sony restrict the purchasing of the PC version of Ghost of Tsushima in so many countries has really taken the wind out of my sails for this game. I'm genuinely disappointed. Heartbroken if you want to be melodramatic, because I want nothing but to gush about this game. This is one of my favorite games of all time. I want to talk about all the cool things you can pull off in the single player and in the multiplayer. I want to draw attention to the little details and the unseen mechanics that few might be privy to. Parts of the game that has really made me appreciate Sucker Punch's design and the direction they took with the game itself. I want to see the community surrounding Ghost of Tsushima to be revitalized and gain enough momentum to see whatever the developers are making next, which will most likely be this game's sequel. And I want to see the multiplayer in this game pop off, if not in a huge way, in a big enough way to see other players have fun with what it provides, because there's a lot of fun to be had. But now, the vibes are so off. Because if so many potential players can't get their hands on this game, let alone play, I don't even know if I want to gas this game up as eagerly as I've been wanting to over the past year or so. And don't get me wrong, the moment that Sony walks back this dreadful business decision of theirs, I'm going to jump on the opportunity and talk about this game, perhaps to the point where I'll become annoying about it. Well, see, JM, that implies you weren't annoying already. Oh, okay, all right, fine. Before then, all I feel is hesitation. And y'all know about hesitation, right? Hesitation is defeat. Ugh. Anyways, this has been a ramble. I apologize for its rather dour tone. Perhaps next time we talk, we'll be focusing on something much more positive and upward-leaning. And if Sony does, in fact, turn back what we can only define to be a highly insidious mistake, then oh boy, the fun will actually begin. But until then, y'all take care of yourselves now. Remember to stay hydrated and get some sleep. I'll see y'all when I'll see y'all next. Peace.